Thanks everyone for joining. So the goal for today is that we're starting Q4 today. Today's the first day of Q4, the magical season for advertising. And what I found historically is that the process, the time of the year that people do their planning really starts in January. So because everyone's so busy in Q4, people often kind of give us at Beeswax a call the first week of January and like, okay, we're ready to be serious about this year, and we have some strategic changes or whatever. And so that means that in Q4, you need to take a bit of time to do the planning, to start thinking about what are the key issues and how are you going to address them, and get those juices flowing and get thinking about it. So what I'm going to do in this presentation is, to some extent, talk up my own game. Like probably many of you in the audience have heard me give the basic Beeswax pitch before. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through some of the elements of how Beeswax operates and put it in the context of 2021 and what we expect and how we should be thinking about the world in 2021. Housekeeping, I think everyone knows me. You follow me on Twitter, all right? I'm pretty out there. All right, cool. We'll have Q&A. So easiest way to do Q&A is to ask your questions in the chat window. At the end, we'll go through as many questions as we have time for. All right. So 2021 is going to be really interesting because 2020 has been very challenging and there's been a lot of change in 2020. And we're going to be emerging from that hangover with a different perspective on advertising, on technology, hopefully a different government, a lot of things changing. So what's going on in 2020? These are some highlights or lowlights, depending on how you look at it. The general sense that 42% of programmatic dollars are going to non-working media. Please don't call it an ad tech tax. That's the worst phrase on earth. But basically, there's always a battle to have more and more of the dollars you want to spend as an advertiser go to the media, and shrinking that is a key development that's happened over the last several years. Probably that 42% was a lot higher 2 or 3 years ago. So let's keep shrinking it. There's fraud. There always been fraud, but now in connected TV, the CPMs are so high that the bad guys have an incentive to spend time there. The ISBA report that came out in the UK tried to track using log files every single impression that went from buyers to sellers to find out where the money was going. And they reported this interesting number that 15% couldn't be tracked in any way. And that really is a bit of a head scratcher. And when we're talking about log files, transparency, all that stuff, you got to wonder where that 15% is going. I'm not going to read all of these, but I think in general, the in-housing trend is continuing. Marketers and advertisers are taking more control. The managed service businesses, though, are thriving within the scope of what they do best. So the idea that managed service has gone away is not true. There's quite a bit of managed service, especially in the TV world, where it can be hard to execute. It can be hard to understand the results. So you have this sort of push and pull where marketers are saying, well, I want to own everything. I want all transparency. But then for certain types of media, certain types of activation, relying on a key partner is still important. So these are all kind of things that are going on right now, and that inform your 2020 strategy, hopefully, but also your 2021 strategy. And I'd like to kind of prognosticate a little bit that 2021 isn't going to be so easy. It's not that I think our natural inclination is to look at the calendar year as some sort of natural cycle. It is a natural cycle. The sun goes around, the earth around the sun, but more of a business cycle. And that, come the end of this year, we're going to have a COVID vaccine, business is back to normal. Hopefully we'll have a new government, everyone will be happy. But that's probably not going to happen. There's going to be a lot of changes in 2021, and it's going to be more complexity there. So, the election in the US, at least, the election money will go away. That's normal. That's easy money this year, and it is going to shrink. It's not clear if sports and other activities will be able to replace that money, and where the money will go. So there's some questions on growth there, especially in the first half of 2021. COVID is, actually increasing in a lot of Europe right now. We've heard from some of our clients concerns about whether there's going to be another lockdown or otherwise, if that's going to be an issue. Antitrust is a subject we could probably talk about for an hour on its own, so I won't talk about that. It's probably pretty speculative. Third-party data, I think we saw Blue Kai exit Europe recently. I think with the IDFA going away and then Chrome's cookies being on a timeline for going away, there's a general question about whether third-party data is a vital part of media strategies moving forward, or if it's going to survive for another year or so until it eventually gets deprecated, or if it'll be replaced by first-party data through various mechanisms. In general, the identity battleground is fascinating. We have all kinds of solutions ranging from LiveRamp, who's really a leader in the space, to smaller startups doing interesting things with clean rooms, or folks doing first-party data syndication. That's fascinating, and I think like everyone needs to have a point of view on what they're going to do here. I think the big mistake is to wait and see, to wait for your vendor to give you a solution, because it's very unlikely that any vendor, even the big ones, will have a real solution for identity. They'll likely have a patchwork of different approaches for different cases. And so as a principle to the transaction, you should be asking yourselves, how do I get ahead of that and understand which of those solutions are best for me? The consolidation, just today we saw there was another acquisition. TrueOptic was purchased by TransUnion. TrueOptic's a partner of ours. I think you'll see more of that. The ad tech market is mature. The organic growth is slower, so vendors growing often have to acquire or merge with other ones to make that happen. And lastly, and I don't think this is new, it's been a trend, especially in certain subsectors of the market like mobile, but looking at the KPIs, and I hear more and more from folks looking at KPIs saying they want their own KPIs, either ROAS, return on ad spend, or hybrid metrics, or offline sales. I think we're well beyond the point where simple KPIs rule and one size fits all makes sense. So this is just my list off the top of my head of things that are important in 2021. There's probably more than this, but depending on your place in the marketplace, some of these could be really pretty vital. And this goes towards that 2021 planning theme. If you're sitting there and you're saying, well, what percentage of the media plans running through my bidder or my DSP are dependent on third-party data? And how will that, if third-party data goes down by 20%, will revenue go down by 20%, or margins go down by 20% or more? And what's my replacement strategy? That's when you're having a strategic conversation with your company, as opposed to just a tactical thing about what to do next. So I would encourage everyone to be having those, or a lot of times I know in my company, you can have the strategic conversation, but it's not good enough to just have it. You need to make decisions. You need to say, okay, here's the path forward. And I encourage folks to be doing that in the next 3 months. So how do you boil it down? What's your big idea? Is it, we need to acquire first party data. We need to have our own identity. We need to align with someone who has their own identity. Those are the questions that I would encourage everyone to write down on a piece of paper, maybe take some time over the next month or so, and do that planning, right? Don't wait for January. All right, so I'm gonna a little bit talk about Beeswax and what we do, and then I'll relate it to these strategic values. So we just had our 6th year anniversary. So we've been doing this for 6 years since we first started the company. We launched about 1 year in. So it's been 5 years since we introduced the bidder as a service. And the basic idea, for everyone on this call probably knows, is that we provide a bidder in the cloud, which is effectively like a custom DSP. So our customers get their own DSP, and they can do whatever they want with it. We think of it as the DSP for control freaks. And so our customers get to control their own supply, control their own data, build their own thing. We call it the flux capacitor. So our customers are the crazy ones who want to travel in time and do whatever. And lastly, you get your own identity. So those are kind of the key pillars to what we do. And I want to relate it a bit to the strategic aspects of 2021. So the first thing is access to supply and data. And these are basically following the trend line in the industry, which is for a while, there was sort of this vast abundance of supply and data. Header bidding made supply uh, skyrocket with duplication. Third-party data is notorious for kind of being a wash of, of questionable quality. And these trends are kind of coming to a head, I think, as we move forward. Um, so first, talking about supply, a lot of traditionally, a lot in programmatic at least, the supply equation was pretty simple, which was I'll buy whatever works, whatever the KPIs work, and maybe I'll filter for fraud, right? I'll get rid of the bad stuff. I'll have a blacklist or a whitelist. I'm sorry, include or exclude list. We're not calling it black or white list anymore. An include or an exclude list, and that's my supply strategy. And what has changed with this duplication and SPO and other innovations around the marketplace is that smart folks are saying, well, no, I'm going to have relationships with the exchanges I work with, and I'm going to spend a little time understanding whether the paths are efficient or not, and whether the data is rich or not. And this is a pretty important development if you're on the buy side. And we have customers, so a number of things that customers do on our platform that I think are interesting. More than half of the media buying that happens on our platform is done on customer seats. So that means our customers and the exchanges have contracts with each other and transact with each other financially without Beeswax taking any percentage and without Beeswax being responsible for the transactions. That's interesting. I think that it's certainly the highest of any platform. I think we may be the only platform that regularly allows customers to have their own seats. I think Xandr might, but most customers don't. And so that shows you that people are doing this. I think that it's also the fact that when you have your own seat and your own relationship with an exchange, you can get them on the phone, right? You as a buyer can get the exchange on the phone, ask them questions, find out what's happening, find out what the trends are, where the hotspots are, et cetera. And I think it's especially important as you think about connected TV and video, where supply is much more concentrated. There's a limited number of companies out there that have quality supply, limited number of exchanges that have quality supply, and having that control makes a lot of sense. So in our world, we filter QPS, and I want to talk about this a little bit. Once again, not necessarily in the context of Beeswax and a sales pitch, but just in terms of what's going on in the QPS world. So I think that a couple of years back, when header bidding really took off, the QPS, or queries per second, skyrocketed in the industry. And some vendors out there would talk about how they had 10 million queries per second globally, and it was very impressive. But in reality, it's such a large number that it's sort of a little bit of a joke, because no marketer, no individual customer could even think about their qualifying for bidding on those 10 million queries per second. It's inherently a wasteful number. And so what we thought about a lot, and I think we'd encourage you to think about, is similar to the SBO conversation, which is, where is the quality availability of inventory? Or is it quality if you have a given path inventory that just doesn't transact very much, very low win rates, versus something, let's say, through Google Open Bidding that might have 40 or 50% win rates? And our friends at Jounce Media have done a great job trying to analyze this and give a better understanding of it. But we're contrarian. We think QPS should be the opposite. Saying you have 10 million QPS is not impressive. Saying that you have 10,000 or 20,000 QPS that matches a very, very high rate is much more impressive. So the next kind of element here is around data. And we feel pretty strongly that customer data is first-party data is a vital lifeblood to programmatic. I don't think we're unique in that. I think that is a common thought, but that customers can actually get a lot more value out of spending more time with their data. So in this example, we have a great quote from the Ozone project about how how their first-party data is protected in our system because it's only theirs. And I would add to that, like, in addition to saying, well, my data is protected, I would also add, like, what else can you get out of your data? So it's not just a user in a segment, it should be a user in a segment with a score of a propensity to react, let's say, or recency, like how when was the data collected and how fresh is it, or updated in near real time. We have a technology called augmenters that allows customers to update our segment data in real time. And that could matter for certain use cases, not for every use case, but it can matter for some. So in general, I would ask, I think understanding your first party data asset and how it relates to your 2021 strategy is sort of a low hanging fruit. Assuming you have first party data, you should be thinking hard about that. I think if you go back a couple of years, the common wisdom was get a DMP, put all your data in there, and you'll make sense of it. Then you export it to a DSP. But with the elimination of third-party cookies, that strategy falls apart. There really is, it becomes very infeasible to do that. So you have to think a lot harder about how you're taking data directly from your first-party sources and making it available in a very rich, lossless way, using a vendor like LiveRamp or directly integrating with a kind of more modern technology platform like Beeswax. So that kind of goes right into the cookie apocalypse. A little side note. I've done, I think this is my 4th webinar of the year that I've done for customers, and 3 of the 4 were called something apocalypse. It started with cookie apocalypse for Chrome, then it was like COVID apocalypse for the Q2 downturn, and then it was IDFA apocalypse. So I think the apocalypse word is being played out a little bit, but we live in apocalyptic times, so what can I say? On identity, obviously a really important issue, and there's not one size fits all here. There's not one solution. I can't introduce, the Beeswax identity solution to solve all your problems. No, it's not going to happen, and neither are any of the other vendors. What I'll say is that what you don't want is to have it be a black box. To the extent, there's lots of ways to identify users or pseudo-identify users, and I think I would make the case pretty strongly that in this somewhat chaotic world we're about to enter or already in, it's really important that you understand what tools you're using and why you're using them, because identity is the linchpin to targeting, to attribution, to all this other stuff. And if you're misusing it, identity, if you're using identity, like for example, if you're using probabilistic identity in a way that is more where you think it's deterministic, you're going to misallocate budget and you're going to misattribute results. There's nothing wrong with probabilistic. You just have to understand if that's what's being used. If you're using frequency capping, or if you're using, let's say, like Beeswax offers an option to do frequency capping based on IP address. That's great. Should you understand that that's not 100% accurate? Yes, IP address is not 100% accurate. There are issues with it, but it's the best you could do in many cases. So you got to move out of the black box. You got to understand what the tools do, and you got to think about it in terms of multiple activities or verbs, if you can think about it that way, which is bidding, targeting, optimization, and attribution, as put on this slide. And there may be different solutions that are good for different things. To just beat the source to death, frequency capping, do anything. You can use IP address, you can use IDFV in-app. We already launched that, so you can use IDFV on Beeswax for in-app frequency capping, which is pretty advanced. But the reason we could do that is because accuracy doesn't matter in frequency capping. You need to do your best on frequency capping. Now, for attribution, IDFV is more or less useless, because it's IDFV, for those of you who aren't familiar, is an identifier that's publisher specific. So a single entity, like Facebook has a single IDFV for a user off Facebook, Instagram, and their other properties. Using it off site on your app won't work. So understanding that difference is pretty important. And I'm not expecting you, the listener, to be an expert in everything. This stuff is very complicated. First of all, download our white paper. We have a white paper on identity that I wrote that's very comprehensive, not salesy at all, just lists out everything you need to know. Secondly, talk to your vendor. Don't trust your vendor. Talk to your vendor. Get them to explain what they're doing in each case. Say, what are you doing for frequency cap? What are you doing for bidding? What are you doing for targeting? Who's the vendors? Those questions need to be answered. And if you don't like your answer, that needs to fold into your 2021 plan. The Chrome cookies aren't going away in January 2021. According to Google's estimates, they'd be going away in January 2022. but that means you have to be doing the work in 2021. You don't want to be caught flat-footed in 2022 and suddenly nothing works, right? All right. So I'm not going to beat this horse to death. Last thing is, I would say this is under the category of innovation. So every Doc Brown deserves a flux capacitor. So that's kind of a a fancy way of saying, like, we think innovation is really important. We think that the idea that you should sort of sit back and let your marketing dollars just spend through different platforms is probably suboptimal for most sizable companies. And so the most obvious area for innovation is around algorithms. So if you there's really kind of this range of approaches on algorithms for bidding. You have, on the one hand, set it and forget it, like Google AdWords. Google AdWords gives you very little input on the algorithm. You just tell it what you want to buy, and it optimizes to a goal. And you end up paying for that. I mean, obviously, you don't get a free algorithm. That you end up paying for that, both in terms of the margin that companies that give black box algorithms charge, but also in terms of the data use. When that algorithm, that black box, learns from your data and gets better with your data, it is helping your competitors. Honestly, it's helping everybody. It's a default co-op. You may not think of the algorithm as a co-op, but it is. If you're Coke and you run a bunch of ads using Google, that algorithm is going to be slightly imperceptibly better when Pepsi runs an ad for the same type of product. That's just the way it works. So that's on the one end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum is writing your own code. So I have a bunch of data scientists. I'm going to look at the RTB request. I'm going to parse it. I'm going to manipulate the bid. I'll have test and control. I'll do all those other things. And that's appropriate for some companies. In this slide I have up here, it's actually a major ride-sharing company who built something like that, who was able to build code that produced, as they actually said so, 10 times better performance on their first-party data with an algorithm than they could get on their own. But where the meaty middle is for most customers is somewhere in between, where you have things ranging from bid modifiers, where you can manipulate the bids in the UI, to more hybrid solutions like our bid modifier and delivery modifier solutions that allow customers to build pretty sophisticated algorithms, but without code necessarily, just data driven. And what's right for you has something to do with how hard your KPIs are, how much you're willing to invest, what your talent level is. But I would encourage almost anyone of size to be somewhere in that spectrum. I think the black box stuff is fine for walled gardens, but more or less inappropriate for most customers that want to drive their own KPIs. And the write your own code is probably good for a subset of customers as well, but not for everybody. The point is, you want to extract value here. You want to differentiate, and you want to make your company better at bidding every single day. So these are some examples of what customers have done on our platform. I mentioned the ride sharing. We have geolocation use cases. We have the programmatic company, which is a agency consultancy in France that has been able to build great results for a gaming company using log data. We have all kinds of results here, and our team can definitely help. And then the last thing I would say is on cost. So I mentioned earlier that I think it was 42% of non-working dollars in the supply chain. This is sort of low-hanging fruit, in that you should be able to squeeze costs out of your vendors, but also your behaviors. And that is, we've seen this with the move towards in-housing. In-housing should naturally be more transparent, if not cheaper. I mean, ideally it's cheaper and more transparent, but at least it's more transparent. And then secondly, looking through the supply chain and thinking about which exchanges and which publishers potentially have the lower take rates that allow you to streamline the percentages. And a key part of this, as indicated by this slide, is contract negotiation. So we believe that the DSP software stack is software, and you should pay for it like software. You don't pay Salesforce a percentage of your sales when you use their CRM. You don't pay You don't pay your email provider a percentage of your sales when you send emails. It should be based on usage and the software incurred in usage. And we feel, and the percentage of media model, which is the more common model in ad tech, was built effectively for the agency use cases. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you're an agency, you really can't commit to software because you're not in charge of spending the money, the clients are. So if you sign up for a multi-million-dollar software product, you can't assure its usage and you can't assure they can be billed through. But for everybody else, flat pricing makes a lot more sense, right? You know how much you're going to spend. If you can negotiate a lower flat price, your effective percentage will go down. I mean, that's really the way it works. And so we encourage our customers, we do business on a more or less flat basis. We encourage our customers to ask their vendors or ask us for strategies for reducing not their percentage of media, their effective percentage of media. That's the real difference here. It's the same way when people buy enterprise software, they talk about their TCO, total cost of ownership. It's the same thing for a bidder or a DSP. You have to think about what is the cost of the software, the people, the overall operation, and take that as a percentage of what the expected media spend is. So cost savings definitely should be a 2021 initiative. I'm not going to talk about that. So that's kind of it. Those are the kind of the key points I would make, which is just from the start, 2021, not going to be easy. It's going to be a complex year. The sands are shifting. It's not going to be like, oh, 2020 is over. This should be easy. It's not going to be easy. Secondly, you should be thinking right now about what you want to accomplish in 2021. What's actual strategic for your business? What are you going to do about it? Is it first party data? Is it cost reduction? Is it in-housing? What is it, right? You should know now, because it'll take 3 months to get it approved. It'll take 3 months to get it aligned. It'll take more than that probably. So you want to hit January 1st, ready to go. And then talking up my game, what are the key things that you can do about it? Well, you can own your data, you can own your supply, you can reduce costs with flat pricing, you can innovate with custom algorithms. And those are kind of like the really big picture things. And then you need to have an identity strategy, because whether you like it or not, identity is going to change a lot in 2021. And if you don't address that in your strategy, at least by picking a vendor or two, you're really going to be behind. All right. So I know I spoke quickly, but let's open it up for questions.
Yeah, thank you, Ari. And just a reminder, this is the webinar companion to our ebook that covers a lot of this in more depth. I've just sent that out to the chat. So if you haven't gotten the ebook yet, feel free to download that for free. It's called Beyond the DSP, Why It's Time for Your Bidder. But let's dive into the questions. We do have a few here. So speaking of first-party data residing with the buyer, a general question. Does Google's customer match apply only to the GDN, or does it also extend to other premium inventory made available to DV360, e.g. not just via DFP, but all other SSPs, Rubicon, PubMatic, etc.?
I don't know. That's a good question. I'm sorry, I don't know the answer. You stumped me.
Great. So we'll have to send them a Beeswax hoodie for being able to stump Ari in a webinar. That's not an official policy, but I'm starting it now. Also, somebody suggested 2020 clips as the amalgam of all the different apocalypse.
Yeah, all right.
You know, but this we are in Q4, so we are nearing the end, and maybe 2021 will be a clips for a year. I don't know.
It can't be worse than 2020.
It can't. Well, we said that before. All right, can you elaborate on how, if your QPS offering is different from other DSPs, and how that allows Beeswax customers to scale buys with high quality traffic?
Yeah, sure. So I'd say that if you zoom out, like there's a lot of QPS out there, and so like that 10 million number I threw out there. But basically, scaled DSPs, if you're building your own bidder, let's start there. If you're building your own bidder or on a small DSP, you probably are pretty throttled on QPS, because the DSP, in order to become profitable, has to manage QPS. And the smaller the DSP, the less QPS they're managing. But you get to some point, and I would argue that Beeswax is at that point where we have almost everything you need. Like, obviously we have all the big exchanges and we have them turned up to, at a pretty high level to give us most of what they have, et cetera. So maybe there are differences in different regions, LATAM, whatever, but like in the US and Europe, we're scaled. So the question then is like, why is our approach better than someone else's? And the way I would argue it is, it's about the clean signal. So if you come to us and you say, I want 100% of Rubicon deal IDs and 100% of Pubmatic in-app traffic, we're going to give you that, and we're going to be accountable for it, so that you're going to actually see in your dashboard the metrics, how much QPS you're getting from us. You're going to see what it is in our meta markets dashboard. And when you run campaigns, one of two things is going to happen. You're either going to deliver at a really good level and everyone's happy, which may or may not be better than the competition, but you'll know what it is. Or if there's an issue and you're under delivering, we're going to be able to know exactly why. There's not going to be some mystery about like whether there's some DSP level optimization in front of you that's opaque and not really easy to identify. We're going to be able to have a three-way conversation with our Rubicon rep and say, hey, customer is running this deal ID, is not getting the reach they're expecting, what's going on? And there's full accountability. You know exactly what's going on, and this happens. Everyone knows that programmatic can be difficult sometimes for these reasons, but we're able to give customers the exact clean signal for what they're getting, and we're totally accountable for that.
Okay. Next question. Do we need to worry about or do anything about Turtle Dove? And I love your logo. Where can I buy a Beeswax hoodie with your logo on it? So first of all, you got to stump Ari.
Yeah, you got to stump me. You can't buy a Beeswax hoodie. You have to stump me. Hard to add.
But we are hiring. We are hiring. So I don't know who this the question asker is, but you can go to our website and look at all our open positions. If you work at Beeswax, I can guarantee you do get one of these. So that's probably your best bet there. Another, love the hoodie. All right, great. It is hoodie weather, so it's worth.
I'm embarrassed.
Worth wearing,
I'm wearing a Google hoodie. There's a G somewhere, or a G.
All right, so Turtle Dove. Turtle Dove. Yeah.
I would suggest that for most people, you can ignore the stuff for now. I think that the Chrome Sandbox proposals are interesting, and they're moving, I would say, pretty slowly down the path towards production. Uncharitably, I would call them vaporware, but it's possible they'll ship on time in early 2021. I think that for most people, if you don't run your own platform, right, it's going to be abstracted away from you. You're not going to have to do anything with the exception of possibly tagging things differently. What is going to matter, and you should worry about, is the idea that your attribution is going to have different layers of accuracy, which exists right now, but we don't think about it right now. If you think about it right now, you have click-through conversions, okay, pretty good, pretty accurate. View-through conversions, not very accurate. And then a whole bunch of stuff that you actually don't even see in the reports because they happen in totally cookieless environments, and they would have been attributed if you had an attribution model that cared about them, but they're not. That's the current world, but we don't think about it very much. We think it just works. In the new world, with SCAD network on Apple, with potentially Turtle Dove on Chrome, on LiveRamp deterministic on some portion of your media, you're going to have a very nuanced and complex stack of truth in your targeting and attribution. And the tools aren't there yet to understand it, but also the mental models aren't there yet to understand it. Will you be willing to spend as much money if you have much less accuracy, or will there be sort of this accuracy discount that you'll have to put in play because you won't know exactly what's going on? And that's the work to be done in 2021.
All right, we actually have a live question from Benjamin Yee. We'll take a chance here and promote you to a panelist. Go ahead and ask your question. All right, so we'll give you 3 more seconds to get connected here before we move on to the next question. All right, must have been a mistake. So yeah, next question. Let's see. Should we expect for RTB protocol to change at some point in 2021? For example, with new suggestions from the Google Privacy Sandbox. You did talk a bit about this, or is the Privacy Sandbox more ad server versus DSP focused?
Well, the RTB protocol changes a lot. I think there's sort of this myth that there are these big versions and that people move monolithically between versions. That's not really the way people tend to act. They tend to add fields when they need them. The more recent version, I guess it's 2.0 of, did I have that right? Yeah, I think 2.0 is the big non-backwards compatible version. and virtually nobody has adopted it because it's so different from the current ones. So we're in this weird state where people keep patching additional stuff on their RTB requests without moving to the big next version. So that's kind of a little geeky digression on the subject. The second part about will the privacy stuff affect RTB? I think it'll be more incremental. I don't think we'll see some like radical non-backwards compatible version of it that accomplishes all the privacy stuff. I think you'll just see variations on the current.
Okay, great. I like this one a lot. Let's see. We are an independent agency programmatic trading desk, and our tech/product team have offered us resources in 2021. What should we build?
That's a good question. I think, well, it depends on your strategy. It depends on how you are differentiating. Are you differentiating on KPIs, in which case, algorithms is probably the way to do it. Are you differentiating on visibility and ease of use, in which case the UI and reporting is the way to do it. So I'd ask yourself those questions. I think that if you look out in the marketplace, there have been, if you think about the kind of agencies or agency-like companies that have done really well, they've tended to abstract away the parts of DSPs that are most important to customers and made them better. So attribution, reporting, and algorithms.
Okay. What's Beeswax's point of view on deterministic IDs, hashed emails, et cetera, and privacy pressures there? Not just GDPR, CCPA, but how the ecosystem is concerned about this.
Yeah, right. This is a really interesting question. So we have a very deep partnership with LiveRamp, and we're excited about the progress they've made in their ATS solution, which is effectively a hashed email solution, hashed identity solution. Our point of view, first of all, our point of view on it is it's not a panacea. We're not going to move to a world where 100% of media is identified through a hashed email. It's just not going to be adopted by consumers or publishers at that rate. We think it's going to be a part of a media plan, and the LiveRamp people may disagree, but that's fine. This is our point of view. So that's the first thing. The second thing is on the privacy side, it's a really tough issue. So customer voluntarily gives their email address, right? No one's talking about inferring or stealing people's emails. It's the customers voluntarily giving you their email address. Great, that's a good positive. Then it's hashed and obfuscated beyond any way to reverse it. Okay, is that identifier, the string of digits that has nothing to do with the user, is that private data? Should that be regulated under GDPR with consent? It's not as clear an issue, and I've had fights on Twitter with people on this subject. I don't want to rehash, haha. But it's a good question. I don't know. I think in the spirit of privacy, it's absolutely private, but the privacy debates are usually run by radicals and fanatics. So they're going to think anything is a violation of privacy. So, we'll see. Yeah.
All right, last question, unless somebody sneaks one in while I'm asking this question.
Yeah, I see someone on the chat window already disagreed with me about it. Everyone has an opinion about persistent.
There you go. Is there a rule of thumb, break-even point? At what level of spend does it make sense to take a serious look at Beeswax?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think if you ballpark the average DSP fee in the low teens. So if you just called up the trade desk right now and said, hey, I need a DSP, they'd probably charge you somewhere in the low teens percentage-wise. If you're bigger, you can get lower rates. Our entry-level price tends to be about $10,000 a month, right? So do the math. Call it $100,000 a month in programmatic spend is a good point. We do business with some people who are smaller than that who need the tech, and our average customer is a lot bigger than that. But $100,000 in programmatic a month sounds right.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone. That's all the questions that we have for Ari today. And I'm sure we'll be back with him in a couple of months with yet another webinar. So thank you, Ari, for joining us. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. And again, you can download the ebook through the link I just sent out through the chat a few minutes ago. And let's make 2021 the year of the bidder and the year that we wrap our hands around all these different changes that are happening in ad tech.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. No more apocalypses.
No more apocalypses.